My practice is a cooperative practice called Cullinan Studio. We were, until quite recently, called Edward Cullinan Architects. Ted Cullinan set the practice up as a cooperative in 1965, and we've been doing low-energy buildings more or less ever since. Initially, we used to do low-energy buildings despite the client's desires, because they were not terribly interested. Now, of course, it is very important, and the knowledge is growing at a huge speed. But as a practice, we have certain exemplars that I can talk about, but I think that we also need to think about reducing demand as well as making the buildings at the same time as making the buildings more energy efficient. So you need to make the fabric really effective so you don't need the heat or the coolth before you start fitting technologies onto it. We think it's really important to talk to the people that are going to use the building, so we spend a lot of time at the briefing stage talking to them about the buildings they know, preferably their existing building, in order to help us understand what they might want in their new building. Since the users are conventionally, you only discuss with the managing director or the chairman or the head of property about the brief for the next building, whereas actually the person who manages, who looks after the energy, or the person who looks after is the receptionist, is just as important in terms of the overall success of the building and the way in which it's going to support the business or the activity. I think the biggest challenge is usually carrying the client with you and understanding that we're talking about a whole life value and not first cost. So that it varies from country to country, but in England it's people want to do something quick and cheap and not worry about the longer term consequence. Whereas, you know, if you can pay back the additional costs over 5 or 6 years, then the whole range of different approaches opens up. So there's a building we did, a really important building in Cambridge, the Cambridge Centre for Mathematical Sciences, which we thought when we were designing it, working with the users and other things like that, was one of the most expensive buildings per square metre that we had ever designed. As far as the university was concerned, the Estates Department, it was the cheapest cheapest building in the university, because if you look at it over a whole life period. I think a favourite project of ours is a carbon neutral garden city for 60,000 people in an area of high housing need in eastern Libya, east of Benghazi, which was approved about a week before the revolution. Now things are calming down. We're hoping the project will pick up again. And we hear that the locals are very keen, because there's such a pressure on housing, to get on with it. So that's wonderful, because it was a large scale. What we were bringing to it was an understanding of the topography, the local climate, and the culture of that part of the world. And that produced a really rich scheme that is completely different from anything that's been built for the last 100 years, but does refer back to the historical period while being entirely contemporary and being carbon neutral. I can tell you what it's not, which is gratuitous shape making, which seems to be the most important thing around the world, and we've got plenty of shape makers ourselves. I think the future of architecture is much quieter, much more ordinary, and much more responsive. And I think the future of architecture in Europe is about making much better use of the buildings we've already got than pulling them down and building new ones. An impossible question, but I've always loved Corb's La Tourette. It's just a great, a fantastic composition. Wonderful to walk around. We stayed there as a family for 2 nights. The piece was fantastic. It's just a shame it never really worked as a monastery, because the revolution within the Catholic Church meant that it was largely redundant as soon as it was finished.